Hello and welcome to talkSPORT's Game Day Podcast with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's Scott Minto and Kevin Hatchard, the European guru. Coming up, Everton and Forest climb out of the bottom three. Leicester drop in, so do Leeds. 21 goals are scored in just 3 matches on a bonkers bank holiday Monday. Manchester United losing their grip on a Champions League spot after back-to-back defeats. Arsenal keep their faint total hopes alive. And it looks like we could be in for a major change in terms of VAR. All details will be revealed on the Game Day podcast from talkSPORT.
And it's finished Fulham 5, Leicester 3. A crazy game at the Cottage, which leaves Leicester in deep, deep trouble.
That's not what I've been used to in the 5 games, but there's a reason why we've lost so many games this season, and our job is to make sure that we're harder to beat. We weren't in the first half today, but we certainly have been in the previous game. So, we'll give players some feedback tomorrow and see where that takes us next week.
Kevin, I'm still reeling from what was a baffling bank holiday Monday.
Yeah, amazing stuff. And I think it underlines why some of these teams are in the position that they are, because they can't defend. So you look at Leicester, they have so much technical quality in that team. But it made me think, the way they lost to Fulham made me think of their away game at Leeds recently. And they actually played some really good football in that game. And then you thought, well, actually, they nearly lost it to one of the worst teams in the league because Leeds had 2 great chances late on. And the problem is, James Maddison talked about this after the game. If you can't defend, it gives you no platform to go and consistently win games, because you can have all of the great attacks you want, all the great goals you want. But if you're shipping 4 and 5 goals, you've got no chance. And that's been embedded in their football for well over a year now.
Yeah, and that was baked in well before Dean Smith turned up. So I know he's getting a little bit of criticism this morning, but this is not necessarily all on Dean Smith. Scott, you were at Craven Cottage to witness Fulham 5, Leicester City 3. And let's just lay it on the line. James Maddison did say some things in the aftermath of the game which might have been taken out of context when he turned around and said his team weren't hungry for the win. They weren't prepared to go out and go into those duels the way they should have done. But ultimately, this was a team that looked so chaotic and frenetic from the very start that to me, they looked like a team that were, as soon as they conceded the first goal, which was a ridiculous goalkeeping error anyway, they looked chaotic. They looked desperate.
Do you know what, Sam? I was there and I'm thinking, right, okay, what are the tactics going to be? And within the first sort of few minutes, it looked like, okay, they're going to try and sit back and counter. But even when you don't have the ball, you can still be aggressive. You can still be really well organised. You can still have those 50-50 battles. And they didn't get anywhere near Fulham. Fulham didn't really need to play that well. And I'll give credit to them. Let me tell you, the 5-3 scoreline absolutely flatters Leicester. Not Fulham.
Oh, yes.
And it was 3-0 at half time. It was 4-0 at one point. And you're thinking, this is, listen, from a player's point of view, and I do feel for James Maddison because he always does step up and speak afterwards. So, he has the courage to do that. He didn't choose his words exactly right, but what he meant was, or what he was saying is, they weren't aggressive in the tackle, and they should have been. When you're down there, Sam, it's really, really tough mentally and psychologically. And sometimes it can feel like you've got lead boots on. It's not that you're not trying. It's just that there's so much pressure down there, and you feel it for the fans. You feel it for, listen, if Leicester go down, there'll be, and the same for any team that goes down, there'll be staff members, people around the training ground that will lose their job. So players do feel all of this. It's not that they don't care. It's just that sometimes the weight of pressure is not good enough. But that's the manager's job and that's the player's job to deal with that. And they're just not dealing with it. And I looked at that game and I thought, you've got to get a point because your next 2 are Liverpool and Newcastle. I don't see them getting a point out of either of those. And I think that was so heartbreaking, the performance. If they carry on that way, they'll get done by 5 in the next 2 games as well. And then they will be down because they won't get 3 points in the last game.
Why was it so open? And Kev, I mean, you saw the game, I saw the game. I thought when you're in a relegation zone, the first thing you do is try and keep control of the match or keep a semblance of control in the match. There was no control in this match from Leicester City.
No, I think the first goal's the killer because I think Scott's absolutely right. I think once that first goal goes in, that panic starts to spread. And you can see that...
Because they're chasing the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that then leaves you halfway, because if your plan was to go and counter, but then you think, we've conceded a goal already, and you think about the enormity of that, then you end up diverging from what you were going to do in the first place. But I think as well, there are two more issues here. The first is that Fulham, I've been so impressed with them in the last few weeks, because it would have been so easy for them to go, right, we've got enough points to stay up, we're going to be fine, we're still annoyed about that FA Cup game, we'll just cruise to the end of the season. But Marco Silva came out and said, look, we're not going to do that. I'm really angry that people think we're going to do that. And they've won at Everton. They've beaten Leicester. And what you want is teams that are going to do justice to themselves, but also justice to the other teams in the league. So if they're giving 100% playing the football they're playing, then that's great to see. So I was really, really impressed with them. And the other thing is, as we say, time and time again, just Leicester making basic errors in defence. And as Maddison said, not just defenders, as a team, not sticking to your assignment, not tracking people, just horrible mistakes.
When you're down there and the confidence is so low, if you concede that first goal and early, suddenly it's like, and somehow you've got to try and find a way, and they have to find a way. We keep on saying week after week after week, this squad is too good to go down. But, they didn't expect to be here. And when you're not mentally prepared for something like this, they should have been. They should have been, from what happened from almost the start of the season. That this is going to be a really difficult season. You got it. It's almost like they've walked into it, or they've kind of ignored what's coming. And now it's almost too little too late. You're absolutely right in what Kev's saying. That first goal went in, shoulders went down, but that's when you need the reaction. And I wouldn't just blame the defence. And I think Maddison's right in that. The two holders, in Samari and Tielemans, were terrible. They gave their defence no protection whatsoever. Paulinho absolutely ran the game. And, look, absolutely felt well played to them for doing well in Fulham. And for their sake, I'd like to see them finish in the top half, because I think they deserve that. But for Leicester's point of view, it's relegation performance.
Yeah, and one of the things that really worries me, Scott, about this is there's, as you mentioned, about sleepwalking into the situation. I think going back a couple of months, and we talked about this several times, about that James Maddison tweet, that tweet that he sends to Rob Tanner, in which he sort of details why he thinks that Rob is picking on them because they're not in a relegation battle. If you look at the way we play football, you can see that there's enough there for us to survive. But actually, I don't think that those players really believed that they were in a relegation battle from the start. And as a result of that, if you don't really believe that you're in that situation, when you need to summon every sinew of your body to get you over the line, to dig out a result, a little bit like Nottingham Forest did yesterday, a little bit like Everton did yesterday, those powers aren't there. Because really in your heart, you don't believe that you should be in this situation in the first place. And it is about that mentality. And I suppose that is where the manager does come in, actually, in convincing you, hold on, you are in trouble and you've got to respond. Can they do that now? Is there anyone who can make them sort of understand that situation now, or has it gone too long?
I think that's what Dean would be saying. I mean, look, he's there for the reason, isn't he? I mean, I think it's there for obvious to say, but as we've both sort of alluded to, once you're in that position, it's almost, not too late, because it's never too late, but it's just difficult to turn it around. Graeme Souness used to say it's not a tap. You can't just turn it on and off. And, you have to be at it 100% of the time. But if mentally you're thinking, do you know what? We'll be all right. The next game will be all right. The next game will be all right. And suddenly the game's tot up and confidence is low and the fans are getting on you. Can I just say a word about the fans as well? I didn't see any of them leaving until the final whistle. They were there right to the very end.
I would have walked out at half time.
Absolutely. They would have been justified too if they wanted to. And they were trying to get behind their team. I've heard that there were shouts of, you're not fit to wear the shirt. I didn't hear them personally. They were over the other side from me. But they're entitled to have a go because, that was a shocking performance. It was, anyone can lose at Craven Cottage, as we've seen this season. But to lose in that manner, in the position that you're in, with the games that you've got left, I'm sorry, I didn't think Leicester up until that game would go down. I do now.
OK, let's get to the Amex Stadium, because I don't think anyone saw this result coming either.
McNeil has been excellent into the penalty area, and he smashed it left-footed, beyond steel, and Everton have 5 at the Amex. This has been an extraordinary performance.
It's nice for the fans, of course. The fans have been terrific ever since I've been here, home and away. But at the end of the day, it's more about getting points on the table.
I think we didn't forget the victory against Man United. The biggest quality of the big team is to forget when you win.
Wow, Everton, who usually can't score for toffee, smashed 5 against Brighton to move out of the bottom 3. I must admit, out of all of the results that you could have given me on Monday afternoon, this one was the one that startled me the most. I could actually have believed that Leicester and Fulham would slug it out, and the same with Nottingham Forest and Southampton. But Everton scoring 5 goals just would blow my mind. There was no chance that would ever happen, surely. And it started brilliantly. Dwight McNeil was sensational. I don't think Brighton were particularly at it, and Everton certainly were right from the very off. But this gives them a great chance of survival, doesn't it, Kev?
Yeah, it's a platform. And it proves to them they can score goals. It proves to them they carry a threat. Dwight McNeil was absolutely outstanding. Arguably his best ever Premier League performance, you'd have to say. He was superb. Doucouré was superb. And obviously having Calvert-Lewin back makes a massive difference because he occupies defenders. He makes those intelligent runs. You know, we talk about his goal scoring, but he's all round a very good player, I think, and that makes a massive difference. Again, we talk about that first goal with Leicester Fulham. It was critical here because scoring after 32 seconds gave them such a lift and seemed to really knock Brighton. And it's so unusual to see Brighton play without that control, without that real belief. And it was interesting that De Zerbi afterwards didn't talk about those individual mistakes. He did talk about mistakes, but the main thrust of what he was saying was we didn't have the motivation. And if we want to get to being a European club that's playing in European competition, then having to play at a weekend, you've got to be able to deal with the tough schedule. And he seemed to feel that mentally they weren't at it. And I think if you play a lot of games in a short space of time, that can happen to you, especially if you're not used to it.
And this is a worry for Brighton over the course of the next few weeks, because almost by design, actually, and I know that Roberto De Zerbi sort of almost pushed for the fact that some of the rearranged fixtures that they've got, and they've got quite a few. In fact, they've got more games to play than anybody else left in the Premier League. He wanted to push them towards the end of the season because he wanted that sort of tournament siege mentality feel so that they can make a late charge for the European places, Scott. But actually, that might be their undoing because, like Kev has already alluded to, coping with that schedule has become increasingly difficult. And that was in evidence yesterday.
Absolutely. And do you know what? I mean, look, I think we all really admire Brighton and everything they've done both on and off the pitch. And they've been amazing. But, if they'd have won that game, they'd have been on 58 points. And United would have been on 63. And Brighton still would have had a game in hand. Technically speaking, you could still say they would have been in the shout with the Champions League. And the reason why I've kind of said for some time now it's not going to happen for Champions League is because when you've got a team that's not quite, mentally used to that in the way that you could talk about Arsenal with the title race, but also the depth of the squad. When you have games in hand, it looks great on paper, but give me points on the board any day of the week because games come thick and fast. People are tired. They pick up injuries, mentally tired as well. It's very difficult to go win, win, win. So that was a massive blow for them.
The Everton fans thought were terrific. It's a hell of a journey on a bank holiday Monday. It's a hell of a journey at any time going from Liverpool down to Brighton. But to do it on a bank holiday Monday when your team are, let's be honest about it, in the large part, pretty rubbish, especially away from home, deserved that sort of performance as a reward. So well done to them. And you sort of touched on Calvert-Lewin. Oh, I love that Dominic Calvert-Lewin. When he is proper fit, when he is firing, when he is ready to play football on a regular basis, there's not many that are as delicious to watch as him.
Absolutely. Look, him being back, and I saw in the Leicester game where even though everyone's talking about, the Maddison penalty miss and that would have been 3-1, and Everton should have won that game. Everton created so many chances. When Dominic Calvert-Lewin, when he is fit, as you say, he makes such a difference. When he's firing, he is worthy of being in the England squad. Now, that's a million miles away from him now. But I'm telling you that result, and the same way of not just a result, but how the result came for Leicester in a negative way. That result for Everton and the performance psychologically, positively now, I think will keep them up. I don't think they'll get anything out of Manchester City. Wolves away, we know that Wolves at home are a decent side. I just feel that Wolves away and Bournemouth at home, who will have nothing to play for, that win there will have given them enough to kick on and keep them up. And that's just an amazing achievement and one I did not see coming at all.
Quickly on Leeds United, an awful weekend for them results-wise, losing as expected away to Manchester City, which actually was quite a good performance, but it's looking tough for them on the back of these results because mainly their next game is against Newcastle United, live on talkSPORT, 12:30 on Saturday. The rest of their fixtures aren't easy, but then none of the fixtures are easy when you're down there scrapping for points. And it's been made harder by what was a terrific win for the Tricky Trees.
A stunning game of football between two sides going hell for leather to try and survive in the Premier League. And it's Nottingham Forest who come out on top and they lift themselves out of the relegation zone.
Well, we start and end with the 3 points, and that's the reality of tonight. The main objective, roller coaster of how we got there, and but the most important thing was the togetherness and the spirit. You know, we're really good. We've had that all season. We showed it again tonight. You know, real good connection with the supporters, as everyone sees when they come here, and in the end it was all enough to get us the 3 points we were desperate for.
Well, it's a very difficult situation, harder than ever. What we need to do is just to continue working and putting the effort that we have been putting. The reality is that we have performed against every opponent that we face, and it's just our own situations that give things away.
Forest 4, Southampton 3. Forest out of the drop zone. Mull of Kintyre was ringing around the City ground. The old antiquated main stand, the Peter Taylor stand, was rocking to its rafters. I'm sure I saw a bit of scaffolding fall off at some point. Certainly it was leaking because it was absolutely pelting it down with rain over the course of the evening. And it was raining goals as well. Actually, going back to where on earth is Alex Crook, I think he's more annoyed about the fact that Forest have won and have moved themselves out of the drop zone. And he might have to shake my hand and say, good pick, fella, than he is about any of the other results that went against them. But Morgan Gibbs-White, Kevin, cost £42.5 million, or will do once all the add-ons have been given to Wolverhampton Wanderers. And if he does end up helping keep them up, he will be worth every single penny.
Yeah, completely. And what's been really interesting is that at home, he's come alive. You know, I know in general away from home, they've not played well and their results have been awful. But you look at his personal statistics, you know, almost all of his goals and assists are at home. And he does seem to come alive in those games. And I think he drives forward really well. Technically, I think he's great. And he affects the game. He's one of those players that the game doesn't just pass him by. He regularly affects the game. I like him very much. I like Brennan Johnson very much. I think he's another one that's always looking to make things happen. And I've got a bit of a soft spot for Forest. I used to live a few doors down from the City Ground, Collick Road. As a student, used to go down there a lot. And that home atmosphere is such a boost for them. It's such a weapon for them to use because you can see in those tight moments, it does get them through. I'm really pleased for Taiwo Awoniyi because I know how hard he's worked to get this Premier League chance. You know, he was loaned all over the place by Liverpool, couldn't find a permanent home, eventually got that work permit, and is scoring Premier League goals. And when he's fit and gets the right service, he's a really tough man to stop. So really pleased for Forest. Southampton, I think this has been in the mix for a while. They've made dreadful decisions at the top of the club throughout the season. And I just think, you know, the chickens are coming home to roost. I think they are where they should be.
Absolutely. On the service that Awoniyi got, Brennan Johnson in particular, very good at providing it. Those two young boys, I mean, they're still in their early 20s. They've got a chance to develop into very good players, haven't they? Johnson, some of his delivery into the box has been terrific. He doesn't always make the right decision. He's still a little bit raw. He's only 21 years of age, but his speed on the counter, his incisiveness on the counter, it gives them a real chance. Now, they've got Chelsea at the weekend, right? They've got to play, I think they've got to play Bournemouth as well, and they've got to play Arsenal. Not easy fixtures by any stretch of the imagination, but they've got a big chance. And actually, Danny Murphy suggested on the show last night, Scott, that 33 points might already be enough. Could it be?
It could, with the form that Leeds and Leicester are in. Yeah, Forest have got Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, Palace away, last game of the season.
Palace away, not Bournemouth. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see where they are, their heads are. But I know what it's like as a player. Yes, you don't want to get injured, but you also want to send off your fans at home last game with a win. So Palace will not be sort of not trying. I just think this Bank Holiday Monday will look back as being unbelievably pivotal as to who stays up and who goes down. Some strange results, some interesting results, and both negatively and positively, we're going to look back and say, that was it. Because, look, they've got 3 games left now. All of them have difficult games and maybe one game where they could think they can get 3 points. So it still could go down to the final day and we still might see some surprises. I just think Everton doing what they did there. Forest on 33 points. I've always said, I've thought recently 34 points would probably be enough. But it might be, Leicester might not pick up another point from here on in. And Leeds as well. Newcastle at home, West Ham away, Spurs at home. They have to win that last game of the season, and Spurs could be Spursy. West Ham's heads might be in Europe, so you never know. But from what we've seen so far, I think the table is as it is and will stay.
Southampton surely now done and dusted. They need to win on Saturday, otherwise they will be relegated against Fulham on Saturday evening. Listen, I think there's so many bad decisions that have been made there, and we've sort of covered them all before. But Ruben Selles, I think he probably needs to go to the doctor just to check to see if he's got some sort of rash in his undercarriage, because he was moving around quite a lot. At times he resembled a toddler on a trampoline. He didn't stop moving throughout the whole game. I couldn't work out whether he was doing an exercise video or he was trying to organise his team. Either way, that penalty, that technical area was so chaotic that at times there were 3 or 4 members of staff in there and he was in the middle of it, jumping up and down. It looked like a 5-year-old's birthday party. It was ridiculous. And I don't think it actually helped the players. Danny Murphy was pulling what little hair he's got out. He was like, this is so distracting. Like, imagine being a player anywhere near these guys. You can't get messages on with any real clarity if you're all shouting, screaming and throwing your arms around. And that sort of chaos, I think, embodies Southampton's season. It's been chaotic. It's been disorganised. It's been naive. And as a result of that, they're going down. Right, let's look at the rest of the action from the Premier League, starting at the London Stadium, as Manchester United continue to make life difficult for themselves.
An early shot, which catches out De Gea. He makes a massive mistake, and it squirms in behind him. And Manchester United just stuttering at the wrong time in the race for the top 4.
Most clean sheets in the Premier League. So we would not be here in this position without him. So... yes, fully my belief, no concerns.
Huge step to beat Manchester United in a run-in is a huge step. Getting 3 points is huge against whoever, but against Manchester United tonight it was massive for us. And look, probably well deserved.
Okay, he's not here, Alex Crook, right? But can we just do a quick survey of hands, a show of hands, before we go any further, before we get into the game and the detail of why Manchester United didn't get over the line in this match? Can we just see a show of hands? Is it all the Glazers' fault? Well, yeah, okay, all right. Kev's saying yes. I actually think maybe it might be, Scott Minto, on this occasion, David De Gea's fault. He was poor for the whole game, not just for the error.
No, do you know what, Sam? He was really poor, and the goal itself was terrible on so many levels. Okay, yes, he slipped, but you, I, or Kev still could have saved that. And I didn't want to sort of use the words "chocky wrists" on air, but that's kind of what it was, and it really affected him.
You were summarising. You actually said you won't see a school goalkeeper make a mistake like that.
Well, okay, yeah. Well, it's pretty much the same thing. You won't under 10s. You'd expect it maybe under 10s, no higher than that. Under 11s, you're having a bit of a word. But and it affected him because he had no presence with crosses coming in, and Mikel Antonio put his arm up one time, and that could have been given as a goal. I mean, it was powder puff there. And you could maybe argue that lack of confidence then spread to the rest of the team, but I don't want to single him out, really. I'd like to talk about the whole team and the sort of characters or lack of that Manchester United have. First 15, 20 minutes, they were the better side, Sam, weren't they? They created 4 or 5 chances, hit the post twice, should have hit the target on a couple of other occasions. The goal goes in, and okay, it's in a crazy manner, but then respond. And they didn't for the rest of the game. And you're looking at Bruno Fernandes. You made a little note to me about him, but all the other sides, all the other players in the side, just not good enough. Now you can argue Bruno Fernandes as a fullback. I'm telling you now, I'd love it all day long if I'm coming up against Bruno Fernandes and not Marcus Rashford. So
and he played
Rashford's
wide,
better
didn't he? Especially in the first 60 minutes of the game.
Kind of, yeah. But he's not a wide man, so he's always coming in. So Kehrer was kind of like having a laugh, really. Weghorst is not really a Manchester United player. They do look better as a team when he's in rather than Martial, but he's not a Manchester United player. Anthony Martial, is nowhere near a Manchester United player, and they're better off getting rid there. So there's a lot of forward players that I even said before the game are not worthy of being a Manchester United player. But it just wasn't good enough, the reaction. So while everyone is jumping on the sort of De Gea bandwagon, and rightly so, it's not just him, it's the rest of the side as well. And he has a big rebuild, or he has a big summer coming up with players he needs to bring in.
I totally agree with that. I mean, David De Gea has made a bigger contribution to Manchester United's relative and small successes over the course of the last few years than most of the other players combined. And occasionally he is going to make a mistake, because goalkeepers do make mistakes. And actually, okay, so you could argue he makes more than most, but then again, he's probably exposed to more shots and has been exposed to more shots in a Manchester United team that haven't been as good as maybe they were prior to his arrival. But the other issues for me, just in terms of the depth of the squad and how, when it was changed, I think Erik ten Hag actually deserves a little bit of criticism, because the way he lined up was with Rashford as the forward, the number 10 was Weghorst, the wide man on one side, on the left was Fernandes, on the right Antony. That clearly wasn't working after about sort of 40, 50 minutes. And as a result of that, he should have just switched it rather than bringing on Martial, who never makes a contribution whenever he comes into the game, ever. I know someone's going to tell me, yeah, but he's got 5 goals as a substitute this season. He scored 7 goals over the season, and whatever. I don't care. He is not good enough to play for Manchester United. He drops too deep. When he did come onto the pitch, he occupied the same space as Marcus Rashford, so he got in Rashford's way. And his attitude is so demoralizing. When you look at him, he just is almost sort of like infectious in the completely negative way, in that he drags the team down. He sort of just looks like he doesn't really want to be there. And I know that just might be his demeanour, but it doesn't have a great effect. But here's the thing for Manchester United, which really worries me, right? Last season, we talked about the character and their resilience, and they had none. Under Ralph Rangnick, they were dreadful in terms of their emotional intelligence and the way they dealt with bad things that happened in games, right? It happened towards the end of the Solskjaer era as well. When they came in, Ten Hag, his coaching staff, Benny McCarthy, who's there as part of the coaching side of the operation, they had to rebuild the confidence of this group. At the beginning of the season, you may have seen them all sort of slapping hands, giving each other fist bumps, high fives, high tens, every time they stopped to go and conceded a corner, for example, because they were sort of trying to get this camaraderie. Where the hell has that gone? Where's it gone? Because it's all just disappeared. When David De Gea let the goal in, everyone just sunk to their knees, hands on heads, as if to say, what's going on here? What have you done? You've let us down. Well, get him out of it.
Yeah. I think the injuries to certainly to Martinez, Varane as well. You take those two out, that's a massive difference in that defensive line, and that experience in Varane's case and that energy in Martinez's case. I think they've really lacked. The De Gea thing, I agree with you in the sense that he's made a lot of big saves for them for a long, long time. What my worry about him would be going forward is that he's no good with the ball at his feet. We know that. It's not secret. That's not a new thing. Now, Erik ten Hag wants a goalkeeper who is really adept with distribution, able to start attacks. He had that with Onana. He doesn't have that now. Now,
Totally, Kev. But give me a list of priorities, and that's not priority number one, is it? That's the problem.
Yeah, the thing is, if De Gea's making loads of brilliant saves, that mitigates that to an extent. If he doesn't have that basic shot stopping anymore, and he is making more mistakes, and of course he made a mistake in Seville as well, then you start to think, well, actually, do I need this guy? Do I need a goalkeeper who's much more rounded, a bit less old school? Because also he's not commanding. He's a brilliant shot stopper on his line, but the reason he doesn't play for Spain is he doesn't come off his line, and he's not commanding. So if you want to go forward as a football club under Ten Hag, I'm not sure he gets you there. And I think that's been what people have talked about all season. And I still think it's a big issue. And if he's the number one at the start of next season, I'm not sure that's what Erik Ten Hag really, truly wants. So it'd be fascinating.
It's interesting because I think we all know that Dean Henderson would have been the number one had he not got COVID 2 seasons ago. And that sort of sliding doors moment where he gets COVID, he doesn't take over from De Gea, and then ends up being farmed out on loan again. Actually, has it robbed Manchester United of a good goalkeeper, a different way of playing? We'll never know. But that was a key moment, I think, in Manchester United's recent history. Another big problem is that Rashford stopped scoring goals, 4 goals in his last 15 games. And Erik Ten Hag has been talking about the burden on Marcus Rashford to score for Manchester United because nobody else does.
Yeah, as well. And we had opportunities to score. And but yeah, we know that. And well, we can emphasize that. They all want to score. There's a lot of effort in this game, and also on Thursday, the team, it's a good team, and we create a lot of opportunities. It would be good that also others take the chances.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to solve that problem. There is a multitude of problems that somehow Manchester United have got to pick through in the summer, and of course, the biggest issue is they don't know who's going to be in charge of the club, Scott. So they don't know who's going to be the chief executive. They don't know who's going to be the owner. They don't know who's going to be providing the funds and how much funds they've got to spend and replenish the squad, if any. And while this takeover continues to drag on, that lack of clarity actually, I think, causes Manchester United a few serious issues because they're planning for the summer. Their transfer planning obviously can't be done with any real certainty.
No, it can't. So you don't know the exact figure. But this is Manchester United, where whoever's in charge, and obviously it's always the Glazers' fault, but whoever's in charge...
Where is he?
Where is he? We need him, don't we? You know, whether they actually give a specific figure, the club is so successful commercially, there will always be a budget, and it will always be a healthy budget. Now, the question about, and you're absolutely right about De Gea, and Kev's absolutely right as well, to say, you know, he's not Erik Ten Hag's type of style of goalkeeper because he wants to play out from the back. But also, too, if he is making mistakes and he's not commanding and he's making mistakes on shot stopping, then that priority, and you're right to say, becomes higher and higher. For me, the number one priority is a striker. I think they also need a central midfielder. I mean, if they had Declan Rice in that midfield, I mean, how good was he the other night? He was absolutely amazing. And I found it really interesting when he said post-match, Manchester United are the biggest club in the world. It was great to play so well against them. It was almost as if, you know, a little bit of flirting's going on.
Flirting a little bit there. He was doing a little bit of the old battering of the eyelids, wasn't he?
Absolutely. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We do think that this will be his last season in the West Ham shirt. And if they get another centre-half as well. But I think you're talking about a goalkeeper now where if he's not doing this and he's not doing that and he's not even doing the shot stopping, then maybe that priority becomes a little bit higher. I do think Manchester United, whoever's in charge, and even if there's a takeover, there'll be a healthy budget to use. And I think Ten Hag needs to be careful who he brings in.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with them. Do you think they'll make the top 4? Because I think a lot of Manchester United fans, prior to the game, and I mentioned it and you and I were on air together, some of them, the more vocal ones, were like, oh, the media are going to blow this up as Liverpool catching Manchester United. It's not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But actually, the points difference is 1. The game's difference is 1. And all of a sudden, the tension is starting to creep in. There is every chance now that any slip that Manchester United make between now and the end of the season, and look, they've got home games and winnable home games that are upcoming. So they should be okay. But bearing in mind what I've seen over the course of the last few weeks, I'm not convinced they're going to be okay.
No, I thought they were nailed on just a couple of weeks ago. I wouldn't say that now at all. Look, Liverpool, as I said before, I don't think are anywhere near the performance of last season, but they're winning games. It's 6 on the spin now. They've got Leicester away, Villa at home and Southampton away. I can see them getting 9 points out of 9 there. So that makes them on 71 points. And because they've got a better goal difference, United need to match that.
A much better goal difference.
Yeah, it was 3 wins out of 5 before the West Ham game, and I'm thinking, yeah, they'll do that. 3 wins out of 4 now. Wolves at home, they should. Bournemouth away, they should. Chelsea at home, they probably should. And Fulham at home, they probably should. But we've seen in recent weeks, and we were at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, weren't we, where they were 2-0 up at half-time. There's no guarantees here.
They don't score in the second half of games. They've scored in 2 of the last 11 in the second half of matches. They tire. They've played a lot more matches than anybody else in Europe, and their fatigue is certainly playing a part. Christian Eriksen can only play 60, 65 minutes at this moment in time. He certainly can't play 3 times in a week. So, look, I tell you what, it's going to be a nervous end to the season for a lot of clubs. Might be an exciting end for Arsenal. 2-0 winners away at Newcastle. Newcastle faltering. They too will need points when they go to Leeds on Saturday live on talkSPORT, because they've dropped points in the top 4 race. A great performance by Arsenal, backing up their win against Chelsea. And that midfield duo of Ødegaard and Jorginho was excellent in this game. Now, I don't think you can say that Chelsea made a mistake in getting rid of Jorginho, right? Because Jorginho, for a long time at Chelsea, he's when you look at, I've mentioned this phrase around Rico Lewis before. Rico Lewis is press resistant. He takes the ball in really tight areas, gets out of a bit of pressure and distributes the ball. Jorginho is pressable, isn't he? I mean, he's one of those players who wants a lot more time on the ball than maybe he's afforded in the Premier League. He's a brilliant passer of the ball, but sometimes he just wants a little bit too much time. When he's got the room to be able to manoeuvre the ball, he can be terrific. And Sunday was one of those examples when he was just on top of his game.
Do you know what? A lot of Chelsea, I mean, it was Marmite at Chelsea, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I've always really liked him. I remember speaking to Jody Morris and saying he's a leader. He's not a loud guy. He's not shouting. But when you want leaders in different ways, in the same way, and it's a completely different player, but the same way Steven Gerrard wasn't like your vocal leader, but give me the ball, I'll do something with it. Jorginho was always happy to receive the ball. I know what you're saying about he always wanted space, but I think he was clever enough to play that 1 or 2 touch if someone was around him. I think his problem was defensively, he's not mobile enough and he doesn't protect the back 4 well enough. And people were saying that Kante should have been playing there all the time. But this is a guy basically who's a leader. He's won the Champions League. He's won the Euros with Italy. He steps up. He takes penalties. In pressure situations, I would always choose to have him because it's about character even more than talent, whether you're at the top or at the bottom. And it was a magnificent performance and a magnificent statement from Arsenal to say, this is our most difficult game left. City, you're going to have to win this because we're not going to lose it.
Yeah, I thought Newcastle were a little bit naive in the fact that they played both Wilson and Isaac together. And I wonder whether or not Eddie Howe went a little bit 1996 Kevin Keegan. I'd love it if we beat them, and made the game far too open. And Ødegaard said, I like the idea of this. Thank you very much. Could have been very different if Jacob Murphy scores after about 20 seconds when he hits the inside of the post. But he didn't. It's going to be a brilliant end to the season for those two. Arsenal just waiting, just behind Manchester City, just giving themselves a big old chance. Manchester City are in action against Real Madrid on Tuesday night. Just wonder whether or not their Champions League distractions could affect their form in the Premier League. They weren't perfect in the match against Leeds United, but we will see what happens with them over the course of the next few weeks. It's going to be interesting to follow. Some major developments in the world of VAR are about to be introduced, and we're all going to get to hear about it. Finally, we're going to be able to hear, or the general public are going to be able to hear, what happens in the VAR room during those big incidents, because it was announced that Chief Refereeing Officer Howard Webb has agreed to deal with Premier League Productions and FIFA to release some of the footage and audio from some of the major incidents. How you feel about this?
Yeah, I think anything that has more transparency, anything that shows the process more, anything that educates people about how VAR works, how refereeing works, I think is a really good thing. I've advocated refs being mic'd up for a long time. If you look at Ligue 1, for example, they've started to have this experiment whereby they show referees and that they mic them up, and they're starting to put out those conversations that they're having with players. So I think anything that makes people understand how the referee's job works and how they come to these conclusions, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, I mean, Jurgen Klopp maybe doesn't want the audio being broadcast, but apart from that, everybody else is quite happy about it. Look, the first stage is to start this pilot TV program, which is going to go out on Premier League Productions, which is sort of the world service of the Premier League, and all the broadcasters that are the rights holders have the opportunity to rebroadcast the program. So you'll see it on your TVs. You may even hear some of it on the radio as well. And it'll be a half-hour show where they go back and try and do a little bit of an explainer about some of the VAR decisions. And it'll be interesting to see how it's received, because it's something that Howard Webb actually introduced when he was in charge of the refereeing in the MLS. It was like this Monday morning thing. Everyone would get together, they'd record this TV show, and he would explain exactly why a decision was made. And I think really what it did was it sort of took the heat out of some of the more controversial decisions, because you're like, oh yeah, okay, well now I understand why they got to that process. Sometimes you might disagree with it, but at least you understand what the thought process was going into making the decisions. And I think sometimes we can sit there and explain it. We do it on a Sunday. We go through a few of the decisions on Men in Black in the Sunday session. But having someone in authority come out and sort of just justify why they've got to where they have, I think helps just make it more palatable and understandable for the listener and the viewer.
100%. And if you actually look at Germany, for example, obviously that's where I do a lot of my work. If you look at the last 2 weekends we've had, so a couple of weeks ago, Sascha Stegemann, who was the referee for Bochum against Dortmund, which was a massive game, not only in the relegation battle, but in the fight for the title, there was a big controversial moment in the second half. He didn't give a penalty. And even though this obviously didn't go down well with Dortmund, afterwards he came out and said, look, I got this wrong. I got this wrong. I should have given a penalty. I should have been asked by VAR to go and have another look. That didn't happen. And so he publicly apologised, talked through what had happened and what had gone wrong. In the game between Schalke and Mainz that I did on Friday night, there was a penalty in the 12th minute of stoppage time, latest ever Bundesliga goal. It was a shirt pull. And the referee, Dr. Matthias Jurlenbeck, came out and said, look, this is why I gave this decision. This is how I got to it. And even though Mainz didn't agree with it, at least he'd set out how he got to that. So I think that's part of the culture there. As you say, Howard Webb has put that in the MLS before. I think it's a really good step.
Yeah, well, I think it's the first step, isn't it? And ultimately, transparency can only be a good thing. And I like the fact that, you know, Howard Webb has taken positive steps since taking this job. It was only December that he took over. Anyone who was thinking that all of a sudden Howard Webb was going to walk through the door and every decision was going to be correct and all the processes were going to be perfect and we were all going to fall in love with VAR, that wasn't going to happen. But over time, I think he's going about it the right way in terms of slowly but surely reinforcing a bit of confidence in the system and hopefully reinforcing some confidence in the referees as well. Kev, thank you very much. Enjoyed that. Tuesday night, we've got Real Madrid against Manchester City live on talkSPORT in the Champions League semi-final. Wednesday night, AC Milan against Inter Milan. Oh, what a derby that is going to be. Remember the last time they played each other in the European Cup? That didn't end very well. The Champions League semi-final first leg kicks off at 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Thursday night, West Ham versus AZ Alkmaar. Come on, West Ham. We all want to go to Prague on a European tour. And then over the weekend, Game Day returns. We'll have a full preview by Thursday afternoon, looking ahead to what should be a fantastic Premier League weekend. Another thrilling Premier League weekend. When is it not?